LA feels a little weird today. Quiet around the building. Like everybody knows something's shifting behind the scenes. And it's not just one headline. It's a coaching move that could protect the offense long term. A possible fix right in the guts of the O-line. A real conversation about a wideout's future. And then a message about Justin Herbert that should have every Chargers fan sitting up straighter. Some days the NFL is just a regular news cycle. Scroll, react, move on. And then there are days where it feels like the whole league is a board game that someone knocked over. And now everybody's scrambling to put the pieces back while the clock is still running. You can feel it in the little stuff. Phones buzzing, meetings that go long, whiteboards getting wiped clean and rewritten. Because if this offense is about to take a step, it's not going to be random. It's going to be planned. So let's start at the top of the chain. The smartest moves aren't always the flashy ones you watch in a highlight package. Sometimes it's about continuity. The boring word that actually wins you seasons. A safety net. A second mind in the same room, learning the same language. So if your top guy ever walks out the door, you're not instantly back in chaos. That's why this next name matters, especially right now when his reputation is taking hits. The Jets just fired offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrand after 1 year, and I can already hear it. Yeah, but their offense was awful. It was. Be honest though, how many coordinators are saving an offense led by Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, and Brady Cook in a situation that's been nothing but dysfunction? Not many. Sometimes the coach isn't the whole problem. Sometimes it's the fire around him, and anybody standing there gets blamed for the smoke. Now step back and look at what the Chargers just did. They went and got their dream offensive coordinator in Mike McDaniel. Rhythm, spacing, chunk plays, making defenses wrong after the snap. That whole world. And if this works the way we think it can, you know how the league operates. Other teams start circling. Head coach interviews, bigger titles, bigger checks. And all of a sudden, you're scrambling again, trying to keep an identity that was just starting to feel real. So the idea being floated is pretty simple, and honestly, kind of sharp. Bring Engstrand in under McDaniel. Let him learn the system. Let him help stabilize the room. Let him grow inside the building. Because if McDaniel ever gets another head coaching shot, you've got someone in-house who already speaks the language. Someone you've been developing instead of someone you're panic hiring. And Engstrand isn't just some random name you pull off a list. He came to the Jets from the Lions, and that matters because he was directly in the Ben Johnson orbit in Detroit, one of the sharpest offensive minds in football, and a guy who was even in the mix for the Chargers job before Harbaugh got here. There are also real Chargers-adjacent connections. Engstrand's a San Diego native. He spent the 2018 season as an offensive analyst at Michigan, and before that, he was a graduate assistant under Harbaugh at USD back in 2005, before Harbaugh left for Stanford. Does that guarantee anything? No, but it does speed up trust. And in the NFL, trust is what lets you move fast without everything cracking. Of course, the pushback is obvious. Where does he even fit? That's fair. But you make room for good coaching. You stack brains. You adjust titles. You don't let a lack of a perfect label stop you from upgrading your staff. Especially when McDaniel didn't rule out more offensive staff changes this week. If the Bolts want to buy low on a coach whose stock might never be cheaper, this is exactly when you do it. So I'll throw it to Bolt fam. Would you bring Engstrand in as the offense's insurance policy? Or does that feel like it would mess with the coaching hierarchy? And while we're sitting in the offensive conversation, we've got to talk about the spot everyone sees every Sunday. Center. Pressure. Collapse. Because it doesn't matter how creative your play design is if the interior gets driven back into your quarterback's lap. Chargers fans have been watching that movie for 2 years. The team chose not to replace Bradley Bozeman. Harbaugh even put a Captain C on his chest. Leadership matters. It does. But leadership doesn't anchor against the bull rush. Leadership doesn't magically keep the pocket clean. And that's where this next name changes the temperature immediately. Tyler Linderbaum. That's the name Chargers fans keep circling before free agency. And it's not just inside Charger circles anymore. This idea is catching traction outside the building too. CBS Sports had Linderbaum ranked as the 5th best player headed toward free agency outright, and they even pointed to the Chargers as the best landing spot. Why? Cap space and a screaming need. The Bolts have the 2nd most effective cap space in the NFL, which means they can hypothetically outbid anyone if they choose to. Now yes, Linderbaum has said he wants to return to the Ravens. Of course he does. Stability is comfortable. But the NFL isn't always about what you want. It's about what shows up in front of you and what you're willing to match. Guys like Linderbaum don't usually touch the open market. He's 25, 3 Pro Bowls in 4 years. He's graded as one of the best at his position, top 5 by PFF, and some people will argue he's number 1. SpotTrack projects his market value at roughly $71 million over 4 years. That's a real number. But think about the alternative. The Chargers have Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt on the edges, 2 elite tackles when they're healthy. Zion Johnson started to shake off the bust label last year. There's still a question at the other guard spot. And in the middle of it all, Bozeman has been the weak point. If you drop Linderbaum at center, you stabilize the heart of the line. Protections get cleaner. The run game becomes more consistent. Herbert gets a pocket he can actually live in instead of surviving in. And with Mike McDaniel calling plays, that's the kind of foundation that lets your offense stay on schedule. Less 3rd and long, more manageable downs, more red zone trips that don't feel like you're begging for a miracle. Will it happen? Maybe not. Baltimore could keep him. But if you want to send a message to the locker room and to your franchise quarterback, that's the swing. So I'm asking you straight. Would you go all in on Linderbaum to protect Herbert? Or do you still believe you can patch it together for 1 more year? And sometimes the toughest decision isn't about who you bring in. It's about who you move out. You can feel those conversations coming the moment a new offensive brain walks into the building. Because if 2025 taught us anything, it's that this receiver room can't just run it back and hope the ending changes. No Chargers wide receiver cracked 800 yards last season. Not one. With Justin Herbert at quarterback. That's not some funny stat. That's a real problem. Ladd McConkey flashed early and then cooled off after a rookie year that went over 1,000 yards. Keenan Allen is a franchise legend, but he's a free agent now. He could return, but he's not the same number 1 guy he was a decade ago. And then there's Quentin Johnston, former 1st-round pick, big frame, raw tools, inconsistent production. Now add the layer that makes this feel urgent. The 5th-year option decision is coming up soon. That's real money, real commitment. And this current regime, Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh, didn't draft Johnston. They don't have the same emotional tie to the pick. They're going to look at it cold. Value, fit, and future. ESPN's Bill Barnwell listed Johnston as a potential trade candidate. And the logic wasn't, he's terrible. It was, his role might be wrong. Barnwell pointed out Johnston profiles best as a power slot receiver. But with McConkey and potentially Allen getting those slot snaps, Johnston only played 13% of his snaps in the slot last year. And the numbers are loud. He averaged 2.6 yards per route run out of the slot, about double what he averaged when split out wide. So the logic becomes pretty straightforward. Maybe a trade is best for him and for the Chargers. Because the Bolts only have 5 picks in the upcoming draft. That's not much ammo when you've got multiple spots to upgrade. If you can recoup picks by moving Johnston, you open doors. You can replace him. You can chase another playmaker. You can restock the cupboard. And even if another team picks up his 5th-year option, they're the one on the hook for the money. Let me say this. Johnston wasn't the only issue. He wasn't the problem, but he also wasn't the answer. And if you're serious about building an offense that wins in January, you can't keep waiting for potential to magically become production while your QB keeps getting hit. So where do you land? Do you trade Johnston to get draft capital and reshape the room? Or do you give him 1 more year and bet on the breakout? And now we get to the piece that might matter most for the Chargers' future. Mike McDaniel's first press conference in LA wasn't just a formality. Every line carried weight, because sooner or later, everything circles back to Justin Herbert. How he's protected, how he's used, and how much he's asked to carry. McDaniel talked about seeing Herbert up close when the Chargers went to Miami in Week 6. You remember that game. South Beach, tight moments, and Herbert was surgical. A 112.2 passer rating, 29 of 38, 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks, and a wild 29-27 comeback win. McDaniel didn't watch that like a fan. He watched it like a coach, storing the details. He had nothing but praise. He even said he's never had a quarterback with the same capabilities as Herbert. That's the kind of line that should light up the locker room. But then he said what Chargers fans have been waiting to hear. He doesn't want Herbert to have to do it all. Because in 2025, Herbert dealt with a makeshift offensive line after the season-ending injuries to Slater and Joe Alt. Even so, he still made the Pro Bowl and had a strong year. 66.4% completions, 3,727 yards, 26 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. And he did it while facing the most pressure of any QB in the entire NFL.